Good morning, traders, and a happy Thursday out there too, everyone. Need to let our morning data points settle in there. Our ADP non-farm employment change, which for the most part, market taking into account and keeping itself in pretty normal standing here. And then outside of that, as far as our data points for today go, we also have an unemployment claims figure due out at 8:30 Eastern. So that'll be just in another 14 minutes there. So what we'll want to do is hop into these charts ahead of time there, so we can see the lay of the land prior to our 8:30 figure. So we'll begin, of course, here by looking at the S&Ps for starters. Right, so we know we had our 3 days of nice high to low action yesterday. We had done a nice trade on the other side of the 47.43 and a quarter, so we were able to get that test out of the way. We also had the daily EMA in that vicinity as well, although they pretty much came in at the same price, so right around that 43 and change mark. So we did take that out. But overnight here in the Globex session, we've been keeping it as an inside range bar. So our overnight low, 47.43 and a quarter, right, matching up with our previous low from that bar from the 20th, but our actual full previous day's low comes in just beneath that 47.41. So keeping it as an inside range bar in the overnight session. So far, we haven't made too much further progress, but what we'll want to keep an eye on is seeing as to how we would trade at and around the previous day's low. Should we reach down any further, if we get too extended, we have all of the work from yesterday's bar that we could certainly play inside of there. So that's just viewing it from the daily side of things. However, when we come over to the 120-minute display, what we'll want to monitor here is the posturing on this 120-minute oscillator. We can see that we certainly have the lower low in the price, and we have yet a higher low in the 120-minute oscillator. So we're working on trying to, put in some holding. We're essentially trading sideways as opposed to lifting too much so far. However, just to have it on the sheets, as far as the 120-minute moving average, that comes in up above at 47.6275 there, basis the S&P. So we'll keep an eye monitoring the oscillator, but certainly want to put a little caution mark there on the previous day's low. Breaching the previous day's low again would not be very constructive there for the ES. So we'll keep an eye there on the dailies, coupled with the 120-minute display there as far as the S&Ps go, with 47.41 being the previous day's low. And then we have the DAX just to take a quick peek at here as well. We had a good extension bar yesterday in the DAX. Our failure to make the full test up on daily charts. We proceeded to have a pretty decent swing to the downside, but similar to some extent like the ES, we haven't really breached the previous day's low. So in the case of the DAX here, that comes in at 16,622. So we are also working with an inside range bar so far in the overnight session there with our DAX. So we'll keep tabs on that one as well. We'll leave that on a 30-minute chart just for that early morning session. And then next in line here, we have the Euro currency here. As we well know, one of the markets that had larger range extension or range expansion, if you would, from the first, new trading day of the year. So we had a pretty deep push also on the other side of 1.1 even, right, for the euro currency. So we did have some damage that was done. We have a couple things to keep in mind. One being the 5 SMA here on the daily charts, 1.10150, right? But what's really interesting, because this also is a variation on what we had with the ES, noting the 120-minute oscillator configuration. However, in the case of the euro currency, we had a much more positive lift or response going for us there. However, into this area above 1.1 even, what we'll start to be testing into is some of this low developed area from our original impulse bar down to the downside. So nice rhythm though on that of the euro currency. We'll keep an eye. It already had some excursion overnight, so might have used up a couple of the bullets, so test it up first, and we'll be cautious. They might want to come back and work themselves, inside of the previous day's range. But if they can hold up, put in a higher low, we can play around on this 120-minute time frame. But on the first try up, respecting some of that low developed area that we had from our original mark down and that of the euro currency. So we have that one well intact. We have the gold here as well. And with the GC, it also had, a decent extension bar yesterday. We know we kind of came down towards our previous congestion zone, or a volume node, if you would, just from having all the previous trading and work that we've done in throughout this area. Just, looking through the sideways line, we put a lot of work here in the beginning of December, another cluster of data points around that, and then likewise, over here from the 21st. So all through this 2047, 2046 area, we've been putting in a lot of work with the gold. So coming into the session here, we had a little lift up on the 120-minute chart. However, no divergences like there were in that of the euro currency or the ES. So for now, we're coming in with this 120-minute flag on the gold. So they might want to work themselves, for perhaps a partial retest on the 120-minute display. So they had a counter-reactive lift overnight and might try in the U.S. morning to do some, testing back down. We could trade inside the tail, and we'll see if we want to put in a higher low. Nothing wrong with that. We're just coming in with this configuration here on the 120-minute chart, so perhaps a partial retest and then hold, but we'll take it one step at a time. For now, we're just left with a pause bar after having 4 days of high to low there in the gold. So that's where we're standing there. We also have the crude. The crude, a pretty stout mover, especially in the overnight session, because we had one large impulse bar yesterday, right? Not quite taking out the previous day's high, although we certainly came very close, right? That was the 73.64 there from the 2-day high. So we were able to, we had a pretty large extension in the overnight, so we just peaked above it. Right? Peaked above that 2-day high, and so far we've been, just loosening up, leaving a mild tail so far. But coming over here to the hourly display, kind of gives a nice visual here because we climbed the wall, took out all the slow developed area. Coming in, we have a little hint of like loss of momentum or sell divergence, but it was a nice impulse move to the upside. So we've already come down and kind of tagged, if you would, 73 even, which was our hourly moving average there in the case of the crude. So today's high, or rather the overnight high, I should say, is going to be pretty crucial. It's 74 even, so kind of like the inverse side of things. If we were to hold at all, and then test back up, that overnight high might just be a little bit of a hurdle there for the crude, so has the ability to do some rotating there in the early morning session. So we'll keep nice tabs there on the crude, and then also, since we had the holiday there on Monday, we'll have the crude figure there today, the EIA data, so I'm sure that'll add a little extra excitement there for that crude as well. And then last but not least, before we go diving into this unemployment claims 830 figure, is that of the bonds here. The bonds, as we know, left a bit of a tail yesterday, ended up closing positive on the day, or close to unchanged. So now we've spent the overnight session eating into the previous day's tail, but the previous day's low comes in at 122.25, so it's a bit of a ways down there. And if we take into account the same 120-minute display again, we know we have this big previous range that we had built out for ourselves, 2 separate tests and data points of the 123, and then we traded through that again yesterday. So with the bonds currently, we've come down and have failed so far to make the full retest down on yesterday's low. So we'll keep an eye on the previous day's low there for the bonds, but for now, just working back down towards that lower end of that previous 120-minute range. And to bear in mind, in case we do get any type of further extension, we know we have all this work from the original movement to the upside that we still would be dealing with if we started to showcase, further weakness on the other side of 123 even. But for now, obviously, clearly we're holding, so that's not a major concern yet, but we'll keep an eye on them, see what type of traction they get going off that 8 a.m. reading there as far as the bonds go. So with that said, we had to make it through our markets in a little bit more of an expedient manner there, just because we had our 8:15 data point there, and now we have one coming up in another 5 minutes at 8:30. So once again, that's our unemployment claim. So we'll want to let everything settle in the meantime, get some of our charts back up and adjusted, and then we'll have Damon on in about another 30 minutes. So that will be nice and interesting as well, seeing where we line up with the market profile for today. And yeah, then we'll take it one step at a time here after we get this morning data point out of the way in just another 4 minutes.